Hi, welcome to today's live webinar organized by Paybics. My name is Hans. I will be your host for the coming 30 minutes. And as always, I'm joined by our CTO Bart. Hi Bart, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
Once again, thanks for attending. Welcome to this webinar. Today we have a special edition since today we primarily target or address payroll providers. Whereas in the past, we primarily targeted multi-country employers. So one of the most important messages we want to get across today was to tell you that our platform is also available for payroll providers, accounting firms, EORs as well, employees of records, and maybe some other related payroll businesses as well. And of course, we know there's a few employers in the call. You're more than welcome to follow the webinar. But it could be that some of your questions will not be fully answered through this webinar. If this is the case, feel free to reach out to either one of us after this webinar. You can all use the chat box in the top right corner to share your comments and questions with us, and I will submit them to Bart as we move along. Okay. So to explain the value of our platform to providers, let us start with describing the value of our platform for employers. So the name of our platform is Epix, as you can see on the visual, and Epix is an integration layer that we put on top of local payroll systems. The data that an end user, a customer, has at its disposal are core HR and payroll data. It's by no means a software HR tool. It's a payroll and a payroll integration tool. And one of its most important features is the unified pre-payroll input capability. That means that you can share your monthly instructions as a customer, as an employer, with each of your local payroll providers through the platform, all in one place. That's what we call unified pre-payroll input. And the same applies for reporting. You can have all the payroll and core HR KPIs available at your fingertips, regardless of the country, regardless of the payroll provider the employer is working with. All those reporting capabilities available at your fingertips. Since it's an integration platform, it's highly connective, meaning that first and foremost, it can connect with most local payroll systems, but also with time and attendance and HCM tools should they exist and be used by the employer. It's a very flexible concept. A customer, an employer can start using the tool for a few countries and then gradually extend to others. Or the customer could start with only unified pre-payroll input in the beginning and then gradually extend to global reporting in a second stage. The tool supports what we call a global model. So a multi-country employer keeps on having direct access to local payroll providers. We are all convinced this is still the best way forward to have a direct line to local payroll providers, and I'm sure you will all think alike. And on the other hand, a customer will have the benefits of integrations through the technology. So the best of both worlds, global, as we like to call it. So that's the value for employers. And before we try to explain the value for payroll providers, let's start with the challenges that you probably already face to a certain extent. Some of you may already serve international customers, and they may already have asked you an integrated view on their global workforce, which is difficult since probably their data will be scattered across many different applications, one application per country. Always difficult to have an overview. They may ask a similar question when it comes to the payroll processing itself, more in particular, the pre-payroll input. Rather than having to navigate between all kinds of local different front ends, it may be very difficult for a customer to do the closing of the monthly payroll cycles in an aligned manner across the countries. And some international customers may also ask you to extend your services to other countries. A typical example would be that you work for a specific company in its home country, its headquarter company. They're quite happy with the level of services that you offer. And since they are so happy, they will more than likely ask you to provide the same services in other countries, which of course is quite a challenge to do so today. Those are mostly the external factors that come into play. There's also some internal challenges that come with serving international customers. What we most often hear is that the input quality delivered by international customers to local payroll provider is a bit under par, which leads to inefficient internal payroll processing. It requires more time by the payroll provider. It's much more time-consuming, manual, and also prone to errors. And some of you may already have partnerships with payroll providers in other countries, but the exchange of data will also be quite manually driven and also time-consuming. So quite some challenges before you're really able to serve an international customer with the same quality level as for your local customers. So as a summary of those challenges, we have a less than ideal product market fit when it comes to international payroll processing, and expanding is definitely an option to another country, of course, but it requires quite an investment per country. You could open up a subsidiary in one or more countries, but of course, quite a substantial investment, a really strategic decision. So to summarize all this, for a local payroll provider, it's quite a challenge to serve and retain international customers due to a limited global reach on the one hand, and maybe the absence of adequate technology on the other. But of course, there's some good news today. There's today a solution for all those challenges, and that solution is called EPIX, the name of our platform. So glad to share with you that our platform is available also for providers. They could act as a referrer, as a value-added reseller, or as a customer. And of course, we'll go through each of those three options, partnering options. But keep in mind, please, that the platform can be used either internally by the local payroll providers to support your end customers even better, or you can sell the platform and have it used by your end customers for the same reasons as I described earlier, namely unified pre-payroll input as an important USP and or global reporting as an important USP. So you either use it internally or you have your end customers use the platform. And that also comes with a few benefits for you as a payroll provider. So let's start with the first option, the referrer. As the name implies, the referrer passes on a lead to Paybics, to us, and we try to convert this lead into a deal. If we succeed in this, Paybics is responsible for the sale, the implementation, the onboarding, the first and second line support. So basically, it would become a Paybics customer. It's up to Paybics to determine the pricing. We make a quotation, and once signed, this is converted into a deal. And when we succeed in doing this, we pay a fee to the referrer, which is based on the recurring revenue of the first 12 months. And of course, we always like to sign a referral agreement whenever you would consider becoming a referrer of Paybics. This is the first option. And then we move to the value-added reseller, our second option. And this comes with a commitment. But first of all, so the value-added reseller provides a multi-country solution to its end customer and is responsible for the sale, the implementation, the onboarding, and the first line support to the end customer, not Paybics, but the value-added reseller. And of course, we're more than happy available for the second line support, not to the end customer, but to the value-added reseller. And we want you to succeed as a value-added reseller, and we're more than happy to be available for support in second line. In this scenario, it is the reseller who owns and keeps on owning the client relationship. It's up to the reseller to determine the pricing of the platform. And we always sign an agreement, and this is based on a commitment. And we typically express this commitment in a number of employees that you think is feasible to onboard during the next 12 months. But so the big difference between the referrer and the value-added reseller is who owns the customer. As a referrer, it's the referrer who passes on the lead to Paybics, and Paybics owns the client relationship. In case of a value-added reseller, it would be then the reseller itself who keeps on being responsible for the client relationship. Yeah. Okay, so and the commitment as a value-added reseller, that comes with a commitment, which is not the case for a referrer. So that's two important differences between the two options here. And then ultimately, a payroll provider could also become a customer. And so as a customer, you use our platform to manage the end-to-end payroll processes of your end customers, and there with various degrees of outsourcing. To give you a few examples here. So you could choose as a payroll provider to use the platform exclusively internally without the end customer having access to the platform. That could be a choice. Another could be a shared access between you as a payroll provider on the one hand and the end customer on the other. The payroll professional of the end customer, for instance, could feed the calendar with time input. That could be a division of tasks between the payroll provider, for instance, and the payroll professional of the end customer. And a third possibility would be that the employees of the end customer would also have access to a part of the platform. ESS stands for Employee Self-Service, and we have such a self-service tool available to manage absences of the employees of the end customer. And so they can check the outstanding balance of holidays, they can submit request for absence, and once approved, this absence automatically integrates with the calendar in the Epix platform. So you could choose between any of those three options here to choose your preferred degree of outsourcing between you as a payroll provider and the end customer. So all kinds of options. Let's now take a closer look to how our platform could help you and the end customer in dealing with different tasks that relate to unified input on the one hand and then global reporting on the other. Bart, could you maybe elaborate on this slide and dive a little bit in more detail here?
Yes, of course, Hans. So here we have a slide that shows you an example of how a setup can be as a provider that is using the system as a customer itself, so being the outsourcer. And on the right, we have also an option where we have an example of a value-added reseller that where the customer, of course, is in the lead in Epix. So when we go to the first line here, entry of monthly input in Epix. So at the left side, this can be, or typically is the provider entering the data, but perhaps part of the information can be added, like absences, for example, can be added by the end user as well, while on the right side, the end user is entering all the data. Now, what does this look like, or how does this look like? I will go into Epix. Here we are. So he will refresh his screen because it was open too long, but here we are. So this is the home screen of Epix, where we see in this demo customer environment that we have a few countries that are configured. We see also some important information over all the different countries. We see the headcounts, the FTE, and some other information. Also, who is leaving and starting in the company in the upcoming 30 days. On the right, we see some validation things we have to solve, and we see some processes that are coming up or even behind, looking in red. Now, this is also a filter button, so it can easily be used to filter out the full screen and to show you some details of a certain country. Now, about input, we were talking about input, so we go to the people environment. Here we see a person. I click on him, and we see here on the left some important information about the person itself and then about his contracts. We see also that this case or this example is immediately a split contract, so he has two contracts with different countries. Now Epix is able to solve this, and he will remember which provider got already which information. So if you change something, then the right provider will receive the differences between the last time and this time when you transfer everything. Now, on personal level, you see here also the information you would expect. So some identification information, a civil state, which is of course historical. So if you click on the pencil, you can change everything. You can add new histories if you want, addresses, bank details, family, everything is behind. So we have some other tabs with extra information, also self-service access is here, and perhaps some injuries that are happening for this will result in ESG reports, for example, that we also will show in a few minutes. Now, this is about the identification of also on contract. Of course, we have some input to do. For example, the contract period, some information about the company where this person works for. Again, bank details and even the car information can be stored for every contract if you want. Next to this, so here we have a Belgian contract. For example, for our German providers, we have extra information which we need for the German government. So here you see extra information that can be added, and this is the case for a lot of countries where we have added extra information. Now, next to this general information, we also can add, of course, salaries and calendars, which you can add here, which can be added also by the self-service documents, validations, and again here self-service can be configured. So this is in a very short overview what we can add in Epix.
There's a question coming in, Bart, a question
Yes.
from Elzbieta. I hope I pronounced that well. Why are all those data important to be kept in the system? I will ask Elzbieta which data she's specifically referring to, but if you can already start answering maybe.
Yeah, so why is it important? Well, what the benefit is of using Epix is that even if it's a Belgian or a German contract or whatever country we see here on the right, I have Italian people, Danish people, we can all manage them in the same way. So all the payroll information, including salaries, calendars, everything is managed in the same way. So in a uniform way, you can manage the full workforce, and then when it's time to close the payroll, you just transfer the population you want to the right country to be calculated locally. So I hope this is an answer on the question.
Yeah, and maybe a general part of the answer would be we only keep track of data when they're important somehow for payroll processing. And it should be kept in ERP. Detailed data about employee is the answer of Elzbieta. Yeah, so we will explain this later in the presentation, Elzbieta. So it is often used, the platform, in conjunction with an ERP tool or an HCM tool. And so it's perfectly possible to have an integration between the two environments. But we look at Epix as your cockpit to manage the end-to-end payroll. And so we keep track of the data that are important to run payroll in different countries.
Okay, I'll move on now. So first of all, you have the input of the data in Epix, the monthly information. Then the second part is the closing every month, of course. So again, here in our examples, on this side, the provider can do it in the name of the customer and transfer all the data to the country. Or in this case, when the customer is at the buttons, he can close himself. So I will go again here to Epix, and I will go into the closure part. So tasks and processes. We'll go to I have set a Belgian closure. I will go a bit back because when you demo it, it remembers where you were. So I will go back to the start. Voila, here we are. So to start a new payroll closure, you have to enter for which payroll provider you want to do this, which employer or legal entity you want to close, and then perhaps the pay group, by when. So you can create a payroll calendar in advance if you want, and then they will pop up on your home screen as we saw. When we go further, then the system says, okay, what do you want to do? An original closure, corrections of previous months, or only personal and contract data transferring? And then if it's an original, for which period do you want to close this? So if you have set this, then the system knows which population can be selected. So of course, these have to be the right people with the right contracts. And they are shown here. Now, some people are not selected. Why is that? Because they still have a validation error. So if there are fields that are not filled in and are mandatory, then they are shown here. You can click on them and you can solve the issue, and then this person becomes clickable and you can add them in the selection. Now let's move on with this selection. Then again, we are now at the person and contract data step. Epix is now showing all the changes you've made during the last pay period, between the previous closure and this one. So now we see here that there are some records that are changed since the previous closure. So you see what the provider already got and what you've made from this record. This is for person, for contract, civil state. Also, if new histories are added or something, or company cars have changed, everything can be here in this list. Then the next step is the salary components. So you see which salary components have changed in this period, but also which one have changed in previous periods. So here we can see that for a previous period, a salary has changed. Again, this is demo data, so that's why we see a lot of this person, because it's always used. And then when we go to the calendar components, we see the calendars of this period that are will be transferred to the provider, again with the color codes you use as payroll codes. But again, here previous months are shown if there are changes that have been made and will be sent as a correction to the provider. And then our last step is here an overview of what you've done, how many contracts you selected. If you click finish, then depending on the provider's possibilities, certain files will be put on the server or transferred, or even an API. So this depends on the possibilities of the local provider, what we can do. But this is then how the process looks like. And again, this process is for every country the same. Yeah. So you go through this the same process, and you see all the changes before you click on finish. And this is exactly the same. Only the finish step, the last step, can be different for different providers.
Unified pre-payroll inputs across countries.
Yes. So then, of course, the third step is then the gross to net, which is always done by the local provider. This is not something that is in Epix, but then our last step here, access to global reporting. Again, here we have the end user who is has access to all the reports. But here, in this case, when it's an outsourcing customer, perhaps the provider provides these reports or gives a limited access to the customer. Now, how do they look like? Here we have 3 menu items. The first one is the workforce analytics, which show you a year-on-year view of your full population with a headcount and an FTE. Again, here the filters work, so you just click on the country and you see how your population in Belgium or in another or in a combination has been changed. So here we have the starters and leavers. So how many people did start in a year-on-year, in a year-to-date, or in the last current or next month. Every number is clickable, so you see in which country and when did people start. You can click on every number, as I said. Workforce composition, so this is contract insights. So how many contracts are fixed term or contingent workers, because you can add them too in the system. Some demographics about gender, nationalities, organizational views, and again here are injuries. As I said, these are also provided. Then we have the labor cost analytics. So when the provider does the calculation, we can import the calculated data. Again, in this case, we did this for Belgium, Italy, and the Netherlands. And because our payroll codes are grouped over the different countries, we can compare between countries. And this is then, as I said, on country level, but we can do this also on period level, again, with the filtering possibilities on top. Also, the personal view we can do. And then we have a lot of filters here also to view another period, to view another currency if you want. And even if you want to see other payroll codes, we can choose them and they will come up here. The last part are the productivity analytics, which are calendar insights. So the number of hours that are productivity, for example, the normal working hours or overtime, sickness, everything can be done here with the filters also. where we have, again, the overviews on weekdays, personal overviews. A Bradford factor is calculated for all the people. And also a question we've gotten recently added is an overview of the number of holidays that people are still having in their self-service. So this also is a very brief overview of the possibilities of our analytics.
Yes. Okay. Another question coming in from Elzbieta. I hope I summarize it well. I did not get how you achieve the unified data. So I think this has to do with the onboarding process, how at the start we have all those data available in one place, because the second question is, normally you should have a tool to clear those data from the employer. So I suppose the question is about how do we get, when we start using the platform, how do we get all the data in one place together?
Yeah. Well, what we see with customers that we have started, indeed, they typically don't have a unified system, a system that is over all the countries, and they use all the local payroll applications, or even don't use payroll applications. Well, at that moment, with the onboarding, we ask the customer to create, like, let's say, Excel files. We have a format of Excel files which we can import, and we ask them to fill it in. We help them to fill it in, and then we import all the different countries into Epics. And this way, the customer gets one unified system with all the people in it. And from then on, they only use Epics to manage this information. They add a person, they change people or information for people, and then they export it every time to the provider, as I've shown with the closure procedure.
Yeah, so indeed, so everything always starts with the upload of the data, of course, and mostly they're delivered to us on a country-by-country basis in a series of files.
Yes.
And then our onboarding people, our customer success consultants, make sure that the data are imported into the tool. And I can tell you from that moment onwards, every customer tells us, whoa, this is a new world opening up. Finally, I have all the data of my global workforce visible here at my eyes, at my fingertips.
Yes.
Okay, another question from Yo. To what extent does Epics cover complex multi-country payroll situations, such as split payroll and shadow payrolls? So meaning one employee related to more than one country per payroll.
Well, what I showed you here is our test person who has two countries. So this person will be sent to the Belgian provider and the German provider. And of course, the salary will have to be put in for the Belgian part and for the German part. Although we also have fields which I think, now I have to search, voila, here, subject to taxes abroad and subject to social security abroad. So these are extra fields that we've added if the taxation is done in other countries. So this is specifically done for split payrolls, where you can choose. So if the provider, in this case, the Belgian provider, receives it, he can see that the taxation is done in, for example, another country. And so this way, if we change, for example, a general thing on the personal data, then both providers will receive this information. For example, civil state changes or something like that.
Yeah, and so maybe also add that when you have two concurrent contracts, that each of the two data sets will be sent to the respective payroll provider.
Yeah.
So in this case, it is information going to the Belgian and information going to the German payroll provider.
Indeed. We remember which provider already got which information.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, Jos is very clear, thank you. Then another question, why should a customer buy Paybix instead of developing a PBI dashboard, given that the customer needs to provide XLS files to instruct Paybix on how to group salary data and other data, I guess, such as holidays, paid leaves, and so on. So I repeat the question from Christina. Okay. Why should a customer buy Paybix instead of developing a PBI dashboard, given that the customer, an easy one, she says. Okay.
Yeah. What is a PBI dashboard?
It will have to do with business intelligence, I suppose.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. and so it needs to provide, yes, indeed, the customer needs to provide XLS files to instruct. Now, to be clear on that, the XLS files are only needed in the beginning to upload the employee data.
Yes.
From that moment onwards, all the data are available in the tool and need to be managed, changed, updated there.
Yes.
And once updated there, they will leave whenever you launch a payroll cycle, they will leave the system and they will be shared with the local payroll provider. And of course, then it's important that the employees also preferably use our self-service application through which they can request time off, and then all the management of absence is also fully automated, not a single Excel sheet that is needed to manage your Excel sheets. If you have a TNA system, also possible to integrate that system with the tool, so no Excel sheets needed there. It's only for the beginning.
Yes, yeah. We use the local payroll codes every time. So if a customer or an employee for a certain country requests time off, and another one in another country also time off, they don't see, so they can be in one team with one approver, they both see time off, but in the end it will be a different payroll code because we know in which country they work and which payroll code it represents for that country. So that's the big difference with a lot of other systems, that we have the payroll code mapping behind epics, which then is translated to the local provider. And that's also for example, for the reporting. I didn't go really deep into the reporting, but that's the advantage. You have a payroll code set per provider, even per legal entity within that provider, and there the grouping of all the payroll codes is done. So for example, we know which the net salary code is, or the sickness code is, and we group them over the different countries, which they are different codes, of course, but we group them in one bucket, and then we can report over all those countries. What we see is if a customer needs to do this by himself in a BI tool, there is a lot of configuration and also a lot of maintenance, because payroll codes tend to change. They are added sometimes in different countries. And they have to do this in different tools. Then we add them once, we put them immediately in the right group, and then they are ready to be used and also to be reported. So that's the difference.
Is this an answer to your question, Christina? In the meantime, I answered another question in the chat box to Chris. He wanted to know if we have partners in APAC. Yes, we do. So feel free to reach out individually, and happy to share the partners with you, the APAC region. Okay. Shall we jump to the next slide, Bart?
Yes.
Taking a look at the time.
I put my slide back on, so here we are. Let's go to the next slide.
Yeah, so maybe an additional word on streamlining internal payroll processes. There's, of course, a business opportunity to expand your reach to global dimensions. But as I mentioned, the input quality of international customers is often not at the same level of local input quality. So, and how do we do this? Bart already explained this. We work heavily on localization. The reasoning is always we want to speak as much as possible the language of the receiving payroll provider. So we use indeed local pay codes, optional local data fields, and optional local data validation rules, all to make sure that what we are about to send to the payroll provider is as pre-validated as possible, allowing automated treatment and processing by the payroll provider. Okay, so it can also be a boost of internal efficiency. Now, I can imagine that you may not already have a local payroll providers in all of the countries of your preference. In that case, I have also good news to share with you. We already have a network that covers no fewer than 132 countries. So if you're in search of a new payroll provider in a new country you wish to expand to, feel free to reach out, and happy to connect you with one of those partners. Okay, and then last but not least, let's also discuss a bit what the platform and the partnering options could be for HCM software providers. Also, they're the weaker point of the powerful HCM systems all around the world is the integration between the HCM system on the one hand and then local payroll systems on the other. So we can realize a substantial upgrade in this integration if you put epics between the HCM system and all the local payroll engines. And if you do, Epix will take care of the translation to all the localized payroll formats that can be different per country and are most likely different per payroll provider. So this is a dramatic upgrade of the integration quality between an HCM and local payroll. So it's also interesting, I think, to explore this as an HCM software or consultant.
We have another question, Hans.
Okay.
So Christina asks if Payfix updates the payroll code matrix according to the evolution of loss over time in the countries.
Yeah, so depending on if you are an employer or a payroll provider, so we have indeed a configuration screen in which the end user can manage all the payroll codes and map those with what we call buckets. Those are the functional similar codes across countries. And so whenever you were to import calculated data that in which there's a payroll code that was not identified or created or not mapped, you will get an error message. You then first need to map that to the right bucket. And once you have done so, you can proceed with the import of calculated data. Now, payroll providers will also get access to this configuration setting. So whenever, as a payroll provider, you have invented a new code, you can include this code yourself into the configuration screen of Epix, making it your customers very easy, and they will not even find an error message since you as a payroll provider will already have done so. Yeah. But it's a screen that is available for end users and payroll providers.
Yeah, it's not that every code is automatically added in the system for every customer, because not all customers use the same codes, and so it's something indeed we have to manage and look who manages this best.
Okay, this brings us to the last slides. So, summarizing, it has never been easier for a payroll provider to access the global payroll market. Whereas it took a substantial investment in the past, it now only requires a subscription to our platform with the different partnering options that we described and explained. And so once again, the benefits of doing so could be that you're better protected against the risk of losing international customers who may want and request this international approach in their pre-payroll input and or global reporting. As a payroll provider, you can tap into an important new source of growth and add services to your existing offering. And at the same time, you can also streamline your internal processes by doing so. So we think, in all modesty, that we have a very compelling offer to all the local payroll providers around the world. If you want to explore one of those options, feel free to reach out to either myself or Bart. You find our contact details there. And you can also check our website. By the way, it's a brand new website, so feel free to check it out. And in the second tab, you will find most of the information about the partnering options that we have described and explained today. Okay, that was all from us. We thank you very much for your time and attention today. Once again, if you want to explore some options, feel free to reach out. And for now, thanks for watching and attending this webinar, and hoping to see you again in one of our future events. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.